His answer was thunderous. For the Catholic faith, I would willingly and joyfully pour forth even 100 lives. Snatch away that one which I have from me, and make no delay about it. But my religion you will never snatch away from me. When asked if he feared death, he smiled. I fear death as much as you do your dinner. A man stands before the gallows. His crime is faith. His sentence is death. But his story is almost lost to time. History has a way of forgetting its bravest souls. But today, we remember. He defied a kingdom, risked everything, and paid the ultimate price. Yet, you may never have heard his name. Who was St. John Ogilvie, and why was he willing to die for a truth the world wanted to erase? John grew up in a time of turmoil, a Scotland fractured between old faith and new power. Drawn to the truth of the Catholic Church, he left his homeland to pursue his faith, eventually joining the Jesuits. But he was not called to safety, he was called to return. Disguised and determined, he stepped onto Scottish soil as an outlaw priest. He traveled in secret, hearing confessions in whispered meetings, celebrating Mass behind locked doors. Every moment was a risk, and yet he pressed on, a shepherd in the shadows, tending to a flock that the law had abandoned. But the noose was already tightening. Betrayed, captured, and imprisoned, John was dragged before his captors, accused of treason. His crime was refusing to acknowledge King James I as the head of the church. His fate was sealed. But before death, they had something far worse in store for him. Severe torture followed. His hair and fingernails were ripped out. For 9 days, he was deprived of sleep, stabbed repeatedly with sharp stakes whenever exhaustion threatened to overtake him. He was beaten, thrown to the cold stone floor, and assaulted with the constant screams of his jailers. Yet through it all, he never broke. He never renounced his faith. He never betrayed his fellow Catholics. His tormentors were astonished, not only by his resilience, but by the humor he displayed even in agony. They could not comprehend the joy he carried in his suffering. Yet there was one way to spare his life: submission. King James himself had posed the question. Would he recognize the king's authority over the church? John's response was unwavering. He declared loyalty to his king, but refused to acknowledge his rule over faith. For that, he was condemned. Even as he was led to his execution, the attempts to break him continued. He was offered wealth, power, and his very life, if only he would renounce Catholicism and betray his brethren. His answer was thunderous. For the Catholic faith, I would willingly and joyfully pour forth even 100 lives. Snatch away that one which I have from me, and make no delay about it, but my religion you will never snatch away from me. When asked if he feared death, he smiled. I fear death as much as you do your dinner. March 10th, 1615, the day of his execution. The noose tightened, and the world lost a man of unbreakable faith. But his story was not over. In a final act, John tossed his rosary into the crowd. It landed in the hands of a Calvinist nobleman, Baron John of Eckersdorff. That man, moved by the moment, would later convert to Catholicism. He traced his faith back to that single gesture in which he reflected, one life lost, one soul saved. The world tried to erase John Ogilvie, but faith is not so easily silenced. His courage still speaks, his sacrifice still echoes. They stripped him of his dignity, but they could not touch his soul. They took his comfort, but they could not steal his joy. They ended his life, but they could not hide his holiness. St. John Ogilvie stood where most would have fallen. He held firm, while others would have crumbled. He understood what many of us forget, that truth is not something we shape to fit our desires. It is something we stand upon, even when the ground beneath us trembles. And so his story asks us, where do we stand? Do we bow to the pressures of the world, reshaping our beliefs to fit the times? Or do we plant our feet in the unshakable foundation of truth, no matter the cost? His was a faith that did not waver, a faith that did not seek comfort but conviction. We may never face the gallows or feel the weight of chains, but in our own ways, we are tested. By ridicule, by doubt, by the subtle whispers that tell us to compromise. John Ogilvie did not live to see the impact of his witness. But today his story reaches us across the centuries, calling us to courage, to faith, to steadfast love. The world will try to forget, but let it not be because we were silent. May we live as John did, unafraid to speak the truth. St. John Ogilvie, pray for us.